How about some top tight end talk in 2022? Is that enough tease for you? It is the Audible Live. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Blue, Matt Waldman. And I don't know if you can see my slick Wyoming rodeo shirt. I was just back from Laramie and the Wyoming Pro Day on Tuesday. Went to Colorado State. Went to the CSU Pro Day on Wednesday. It's Thursday, Matt, and Trey McBride's my number one tight end.
Me too.
Let's talk about him. Let's talk about him because he ran a 4.56, looking really good, and just how it's almost RSP day. We're going to get there in just a little bit. But how the tight end position has changed and why guys like Trey McBride can catapult themselves to the top of the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was a time, and I think it's still happening in a fair portion of the NFL, and you see it reflected in NFL media, where they're looking for tight ends where blocking may be either the priority or players who have the size to be inline tight ends is still heavily weighted to the point that maybe it's, they erred on that side. Now, the grand exception of that for a long time was Bill Belichick, who was like, forget the blockers, man. I can get those in the late rounds. Give me a receiver. And then if they can block well, that's all the better. But the receiving's the priority. And I think with someone like McBride, you see that he can block in line, but he's 246, 247-ish pounds. At least that was his listed weight before the pro day. And he'll grow into that role. But most likely, the way that they're spreading out defenses and the way that they're using multiple tight ends, you get a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you want to use a tight end as more of an H-back. You can put him on the wing. You can put him outside the numbers. You can put him in the slot, even in the backfield. And McBride checks all those boxes because he can do all of that for you. He may not be a matchup killer at on the outside, but that 4.56 is encouraging enough to say he can grow into that too. But what makes him so compelling is his catch radius, his toughness at the catch point. He's a rugged player. We've heard for years, probably for the past 8 to 10 years, somebody's the next Gronkowski. Last year, I joked that Pat Fryermuth was should be nicknamed Rob Slokowski, and that he would still be one of the top 2 tight ends on the board and a really good one. And he and Kyle Pitts put up 2 of the 10 best all-time productive seasons for tight ends as rookies. And when you look at McBride, I think he's someone that can give you a chance to crack that list. I call him H-Kowski for H-back Gronkowski. That's my if we're going to go with the latest Gronkowski comparison. He's certainly not as rugged as Rob in terms, or he's not as I don't think he's as fluid as Rob as a runner, but he's very nimble. The underrated thing about his game that I think sets him apart is that a lot of runners are very good at keeping their knees high and getting their feet up through trash. And while he's not someone that's going to deliver jump cuts on you, he is a player that when defenders reach low to wrap him up, time and time again, I see him get his feet high enough to break through those tackles. And then he just hammers down on you like you're a nail,
Yeah, there's almost some running back to his game. And I'll even mention this, Matt, he kind of slouches when he stands. But when he runs, like he's giving you shoulders and knees, and that was about it.
Yeah, he kind of, a favorite of long time ago, like as a low end hopeful who never really made it, but he reminds me a little of him, but a better, way better version of him is Joe John Duncan out of Dixie State, who played for the Broncos. He was the type of guy who was physical and strong as a runner, but also could go up and win the ball in a way that you really wouldn't have expected from him. With a guy like McBride, he, as a blocker, he's good and going to get very strong at that. And then runner after the catch and at the catch point. I mean, I think he's the best catch point receiver in this class. And there are some pretty good ones who just don't have the blocking skills he has. So if they had the blocking skills, it would be a great class. Right now, it's an intriguing class with some good guys up at the top.
Yeah, let's talk about this class, Bloom, and why McBride leads the way. And then also this position. You see wide receivers getting paid. When are tight ends getting paid? And to prevent from paying them, because NFL never really wants to pay you. They do pay you. They don't really want to. Maybe just drafting more young guys would be the key.
Right. And the background of the position is the pay just is going to continue to go up, right? Evan Ingram got what, $9 million, $10 million on a prove it deal with Jacksonville. Will Dissly got $8 million a year. Now that's Seattle. All right. Yeah. But you can see David Njoku franchise tag without even pause, hesitation for Cleveland. Mike Gesicki, it was a no-brainer to franchise tag him. That's an $11 million, 1 year, $11 million deal. And I think we're going to see with some of these tight ends, probably a tight end like Kyle Pitts is going to want to be paid like a wide receiver. And that's the other thing is these tight ends, Trey McBride definitely falls into this category. Tight ends that are used more like wide receivers are going to want to be paid like wide receivers because that's where we saw the most explosive growth in pay this offseason. All these things lead to a stress on tight end and teams being willing to take tight ends earlier than they might take similar quality prospects at other positions. So tight end position value, teams want 2, they want 3. Don't be surprised if, for instance, a team like Detroit that has TJ Hawkinson and is trying to work out an extension for him. So TJ Hawkinson is going to be, I think, the guy that he's going to be the next highest paid tight end until the next contract for Kyle Pitts or something like that. Don't be surprised if Detroit takes McBride, right? When you're saying, where's McBride going to land? It could be any team. It doesn't matter what the teams have at tight end right now. So the rest of the class, however, is not a great class. You know, we've seen some tight end classes, the David Njoku, Evan Ingram class, you know, we've seen some really good classes. Jalen Weidermeyer, I think, was a player who had some buzz coming into the draft season, did not have a good combine, had a terrible combine, actually. Is it Kentley Platt, Math Bomb, who does the relative athletic score? I think his relative athletic score was under 1. Yeah. So that's something. Now, granted, are you taking him? Because you talked about it. On one side, you have the blocking tight end. On the other side, you have the receiving tight end, the hybrid tight end. And, you know, maybe teams will overlook that because he's a competent receiver. He's a receiver. He can contribute as a receiver. He's just not going to necessarily add a lot of value to his touches as a receiver. And he's primarily going to be a blocker. So, you know, that's the level of prospect you're looking at. So for our fantasy takes, McBride is really going to lead the way. And I think we may see him be the only tight end taken, in the top 75 picks, top 90 picks, maybe the only tight end taken on the first 2 days.
I'd say you should go in the first round, and I'll give you a team, Bloom. Kansas City.
Sure. They like Noah Gray,
They got those 2 picks, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it like 27, 28, whatever they are?
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
Travis Kelce's not a spring chicken, man.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, it's one of those things, guys, it's like a pass rusher. Like, just every team needs them. You can never have enough. And I think with offensive designs, you mentioned Bill Belichick, you mentioned New England. I think that really set the tone for you can have an offense. That's why, again, I look at Detroit and I think, why can't Detroit have an offense built around their tight ends? So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what happens as we watch Josh McDaniels with Foster Moreau and Darren Waller and so on and so forth, even though they have Devontae Adams now, how the league continues to go towards 2 tight ends, sometimes even 3 tight ends being on the field as more of a norm than an exception.
Especially with all the drop 8 coverage that's coming.
Right.
Yeah. Matt, well, actually, let's unpack that a little bit, Matt, and talk about why this type of guy would be the type of guy that teams want.
Yeah, because really you want, in a situation where all the teams have been spreading the field, and all the offense has been spreading the field, and then defenses say, listen, we're not giving you the deep shots anymore. We're not going to give you those vertical plays that are so easy for you to do over the past 4 to 5 years. Now we're going to drop 8 in the coverage, and we're going to force you to be patient. And we saw that it took a good probably 10 to 12 games for Patrick Mahomes to actually figure out how to be a little bit more patient, and as well as many other teams and quarterbacks, young quarterbacks who have been used to being able to get away with these vertical shots now have to check to the run, now have to, execute more prolonged drives with more dink and dunk. So if you have players that you can get the ball in their hands quickly off of play action, or you can use them in the run game, you get that flexibility to do a number of things. So what McBride gives you is that, and a lot of these tight ends actually give you, is that they can help out either on the front side or back side as a blocker. They can also help you out off of that with a constraint play when teams are expecting from a heavy set to run the ball. They can run play action and be wide open in the flat, have a one-on-one against a linebacker or a safety, and their running skills either to avoid a defender or to be able to run them over is going to help them move the chains. They can work up the seams against defenders who are now playing tighter into the box, because eventually, if you continue running the ball and getting 4 to 5 yards a clip and keep getting first downs, those teams in drop 8 have to come out of drop 8 and they got to start climbing up to the box. And that's just how those types of things work. And as Bloom said, even if this isn't a top heavy class, it's kind of an upside down class. The way I look at it is you have McBride, probably Cade Otton, as another example of a guy. Greg Dulcich are guys who have the athletic ability and some blocking skills. Otton is probably the best blocker after McBride, who can also catch the ball really well, but injuries are the thing with him. But after that, Jeremy Ruckert is like Jake Butt or Nick Vanette or any of these. Just pick any Ohio State or Michigan tight end that's come out. I hate to logo scout, but they catch well enough, but they're not going to mismatch you. In terms of the offense, you're going to get some play out of them. But if they give you a 400-yard season, that's a success for them in the receiving game. That's not much for fantasy. So you're going to start looking at the higher upside guys in this class, guys who maybe might play more on the wing and block on the backside for you, but aren't McBride, who can play all over and take a guy on one-on-one on the front side of a play. So guys like that. Yeah, Jelani Woods will be a fun one to talk about, and he certainly fits in this realm. But so do guys like Cole Turner, Curtis Hodges, who are more late round guys, but have unbelievable catch radiuses, great length, very good quickness, and they win the ball in tight space, get thrown open. Woods is a good curiosity because he won all the metrics in terms of like the Kent Lee Platt's RAS score. But when you watch his game, I saw 2 plays in 3 years of tape where he even gave a hint of that athletic ability on tape. So he's a guy that if your fantasy drafters who are not like watching shows like this or looking at people who break down the prospects and they just look straight at the spreadsheet, they are going to be flocking to that guy. But I'm telling you, there's a reason why he had to leave Oklahoma State, because he wasn't even the first tight end on their depth chart for much of his career. And he's basically in role and how it translates to film or translates to the game. He's a number 2 tight end in an NFL offense at best. And it's only if he translates that athletic ability. And what that means is if he hasn't translated it in 3 years thus far in the roles they've given him, and he's had plenty of opportunity, he probably doesn't process the game very fast, and it's unlikely he's going to process it any faster with more complexity that the NFL demands from him.
Bloom, you're not asleep. You are here with us. You're looking at your screen. Let me see your eyes, Bloom. I love your eyes. Look at that. See? Look at that guy right there. Sigmund, there's something that we love to do on this show, and it's all shows. All of our shows and all of us as men is just speak the truth and to maybe even try to change minds or break stereotypes. I bring this up because you won't be surprised. You probably know the question already, because we've always said glory to the players, glory to the game. And we love the influence that a player's mom can have on them, right? Like for years, how many years, Bloom, have we done this and been like, let's ask this player about his mom? Well, I was able to ask Trey McBride about his mom's, plural, his mom. He comes from a family with a married couple of women. And there's something that I'll say this as a country person, because he's from Fort Morgan. and I'm from Grover, and I got to throw in a little Grover question. I didn't tell him that my sign that says "Boyhood Home of Cecil Lammey" is coming. By the way, Grover City Council
Yes.
has heard it. That is on the way. I got the news last week from my friend Kevin, and I should probably stop calling him Heavy Kevy on the air. But anyway, thank you, Kevin. So yes, that sign, "Boyhood Home of Cecil Lammey," is on the way for Grover. But I had to talk to Trey yesterday and ask him about the small town influence, because people will bag on us small town people because we're not accepting. Actually, quite the opposite with Trey's family. When his moms first moved to Fort Morgan from Greeley, Jen and Kate, I believe, I hope I don't get their names wrong, and I did get to say hi to him yesterday. But when his mothers moved to Fort Morgan 20 years ago, there were no outwardly gay couples in the community at all whatsoever. In a small rural community, this beet factory there smells like beets all the times in Fort Morgan. And what happened in that community? Now, were there some people jealous of the McBride boys? Certainly. And their athletic ability? Certainly, 100%. That's part of it. That's part of any, youth sports, whether it's in the city or in the country. But it often grinds my gears, Bloom, when people say, "Oh, those country people, they're so dumb. They won't tolerate anything. They won't accept anything." And for me, it's not tolerating. Like, I tolerate when I stub my toe. I tolerate the pain. Accepting. Be very accepting. And guess what the country people did in Fort Morgan? They accepted the McBrides, and they accepted them as part of the community, welcomed them, embraced them, loved them, enjoyed them. Like, it was such a great story. Athletic had a piece on Trey McBride and his two moms. But it's that influence, and it made, you won't be surprised by this, Bloom, I made Trey McBride choke up yesterday in talking about it, in talking about the importance of community, the importance of acceptance, his two moms coming from a small town and having that, you can't do this. Football players, and, of course, in football, it's the ultimate masculinity. It's supposed to come from here. Nope. Talent can come from anywhere. And you see just how much his moms and both of his mothers mean to him. And you see how much this game means to him.
Yeah, wow. There's any number of places we could go here. One of the things I'm thinking about as you're talking about this, though, Cease, is Lynn Swann, right? And ballet.
Yes.
We can go all the way back to the 70s. And Lynn Swann, who made, for my money, the most iconic plays of the 1970s. It was ballet. This idea that, like you said, football is masculine. It's the ultimate test of your manhood. You're trying to take someone's manhood. And we've often bandied about, going back to our days when we worked closely with the great Mark Folletti, doing something that highlights how so many football players were raised by their moms or their aunts or their grandmas, and were raised by two moms. You don't necessarily have to get this hardening influence, toughen you up. It comes, and also, who is stronger in our families than the women in our families? Who's emotionally more resilient, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, also, one of the things I'd like to say about this story is we're getting to the point, hopefully, where it is no big deal. It's no big deal, right? Yeah, I was raised by my two moms, Like I said, this prospect was raised by his aunt, raised by his grandma. This prospect was adopted, Colin Kaepernick. So it can come from anywhere, right? There isn't one set of ingredients. There isn't one model. The only real important ingredient is love, right? Support. And like you said, support of a community. And I think at this time of the season when we're talking about draft and this time of the calendar, all of these players had support of their community, support of not just their families, not just their parents, not even just the school they went to. And it is important to remember, like you said, make a player chokes up when he thinks about everything that has gone to get them to this point. And it's great that the diversity of backgrounds can be celebrated, because there is no one recipe for a football player to make it.
Yeah, and I think I probably stole that question from Blue Matt, because it's my spotlight question. Like, hey, I said, "Hey, Trey, the spotlight's on you today, but let's turn the spotlight around and shine it on your community and small town and your moms and your family and the people that brought you here." And that's when he got choked up, because he's like, "I'm not supposed to be here." Because people will tell you all the time what you can't do, right? All the time. They'll tell you what you can't do instead of what you can do. Who's the South Dakota State? I could just look at it right now. I was writing about him yesterday. The quarterback, Chris Oladukin, or Oladukin, Hayukin, whatever. he was actually asked in college by coaches, like, when are you going to get into coaching? And like the Steelers worked him out. And I want, certainly athletic. He definitely pulls the ball down a little bit too soon. And we're talking like tryout guy, basically. But like these guys are told a lot, even the top first round picks or top 50 picks, or whatever Trey McBride's going to be, or Hayukin or Olukadun. I'm sorry, I'm hacking your name. Like a tryout guy. These guys are often told, you're not going to do this. What else are you going to do? Like, hey, you cut me a deal on my insurance? Like, sure. Hold a second. Before I'm going to go play flow, can I at least, throw some passes in the NFL? But, that emotion from Trey McBride, I think, highlights just that journey that McBride and everyone that makes it that far gets to go on.
Oh, absolutely. Because anytime you're in a performance profession, you're going to be told that the odds are stacked against you, and it's going to be assumed that you're not going to make it. I mean, I remember 30 years ago being in a music school that has produced a lot of Grammy award-winning musicians, and being in a classroom where we would, we'd have a bunch of players together, and what would happen is that we'd get these small groups and we'd perform, and the teacher who was there was an old school jazz musician who came up playing in clubs, and he came up playing in clubs where, you'd come to jam sessions to play, and they try to humiliate you off the stage as your lesson to learn. And if you could hang with that, you'd be okay. And, he'd be the guy who, when Sinatra would come into town, he and a lot of the teachers there would go and be playing in the big band that would be there, or whatever group that, established group that needed that. But he was the type of teacher that he would tell you the unvarnished truth about things. So we'd get up there and play, and he'd find the part where somebody messed up, and he'd go, okay, play that again. And then they'd play it. And then he'd like get every drummer out of the class and have them play. And then he'd go, okay, here's the deal. If I were leading a band and we were touring, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. I'd keep you till the next gig, till somebody else better came along, and then I would dump you at the side of the road. You would probably be able to stay, and there were a lot of people that couldn't take that, and when they couldn't take that, they inevitably, it questioned them. They questioned themselves and either left or they got better, and when you think about this profession, with football, especially playing football, the odds of becoming a starting or a contributing player with a long-term career in the NFL is very low. I mean, you're talking about 1% to 3% of the entire football playing population at best. And when you talk about backgrounds and the diversity of backgrounds, John Danaher, who was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu teacher, like a competitive Brazilian jiu-jitsu teacher that the great John Owning with PFF recommended as a guy to follow. And I was reading something of his recently where he said he was talking about, he's trained a lot of great competitors who've won international events, and he's been around a lot of great athletes. And what do great athletes have in common? And he said it's not physical types. It's not all the prototypical things that we like to measure during this draft cycle. He said they're all different sizes, heights, personalities. There's not a template. The only thing that they have in common is that they're willing to deprive themselves of something, of any type of immediate gratification in search of a longer goal. They're willing to live with struggle, and willing to live with having to put through long periods of effort to get to something that will eventually bear out. And these are the players who are at this stage right now. Many of them are those, have that in common. And the ones that don't are the ones where they, the Devontae Parkers of the world who said, it's just God-given talent, it's easy, have to learn to do those things at this level. And that's kind of the difference, is that you either have guys who coasted and now that they're about to have to learn, or they're guys who are continuing to overachieve and push and continue to buck the odds that everyone has put in front of them.
Bloom, fascinating conversation, because it's more than just the football, the performance on the field. It's how you got there and who helped get you there. We didn't do all this by ourselves.
Nobody did. Nobody. Cecil, you're going to lead me into the thicket here, into the briar patch.
Oh, you think I did that on accident?
Right. I mean, look. Oh, geez. I mean, how can we get this back to football, right? Because it's this paradox, because so much of the accomplishments and achievements are considered individual. But even on the football field, this is where we get into the idea, quarterback wins is not a statistic. Well, okay, quarterback wins just stand for the idea that the quarterback has the most influence on the game of any of the players on the field. So tell me a statistic in football that isn't the result of more than one player's efforts. I don't know that there is. Holding penalties for offensive linemen is one of the only ones I could think of. Even if you're talking about field goal kicking, you got the long snapper, you've got the holder, you've got, right. No matter what, everything
it's the ultimate team game, huh? Kind of like life.
Right. There's nothing that is accomplished alone, and I think that, again, without going too deep into the briar patch here, the self-made man. I did it myself with just my hard work. I mean, there are probably some stories, but even if you consider, because here in New Orleans, we honored our ancestors right here. Since I just got this desk, this is my grandfather actually, Israel Bloom, and I've got some other fun Bloom artifacts around here. Even unless you're going out in the woods and building your own shelter on knowledge that you came up with on your own, how to trap animals and grow food, and nobody told you anything.
You mean you didn't read books?
Right. We're all standing on the shoulders of thousands, of millions of people that came before us. And it all comes back to humility. And I think that's a massive ingredient in what, I'll embarrass Matt here. I don't know how many times. This is probably the 787th time I've referenced the Great Emotional Divide. It's one of the essential pieces written about football, and in some ways, it reminds me of one of my college professors where we were studying Immanuel Kant, and he said, "Well, none of us can even understand what he was trying to say. Now let's get into it and study it." And that piece, and I want to paraphrase or put words in Matt's mouth, is that in the end, as Matt was just laying out, the ultimate success of a player in the NFL is not going to be based on things we can observe on film or measure. And that's why, even for teams, it's very difficult. And I'll circle this all the way back around to a football point and say, when you consider that, the teams actually do a pretty good job, right? When you consider how inexact this is and how many human factors there are, that not only are they difficult to measure or ascertain, but they can even change as the story unfolds, right? I mean, a player can conquer every challenge until they meet a challenge that they didn't anticipate, and then a different part of their personality comes out. So there's these jokes like Vinny Serrato or whoever just sitting at dinner with a player and just didn't like that he put ketchup on his steak or something. I'm mashing together 2 or 3 different stories when I say that. But hey, if any of us were in charge of making these kinds of calls, like the calls they're going to make in the first round, you better bet that, I really believe that when we make eye contact, we upload and download each other's souls. We get a load of each other. We get each other's vibes. And yeah, I'm not using a first round pick on a player if I don't like his vibe. I don't care if people think that's inexact or it's not based on objective data. That is the kind of stuff that you can pick up on, that you can foresee unforeseeable things. It's that intuition. And I think teams actually do a pretty good job navigating these very stormy seas.
It's instinct, right? Which is coded in your DNA. Now I'm going to go down my wormhole.
Right.
So that's how it happens. And I do like that. I like that connection, because we were talking off air about, like, if someone's a certain way, maybe a little too much, like, I remember being younger. Remember what that was like, Matt? And running into friends who are like, me and my girlfriend.
I still getting carded. Okay.
Okay. All right. There we go. I remember friends being like, oh, me and my girlfriend, we don't fight at all. We don't argue about anything. And I was like, you guys aren't going to last. Like, there's something wrong there. Like, if someone's like super squeaky clean, you're like, I don't necessarily trust that guy. It's DNA, it's coding. It's like your instinct, your gut. And that's why the gut check, Matt Waldman, see what I did there? And the Great Emotional Divide, I think it is something to ponder or to think about, and to think harder about when looking at these prospects, because at the end of the day, and in doing this for 20 plus years, Matt, you know that there's a lot of similarities physically, and it's the physical stuff that's easy to see, you know, and that's something where that's you have to be able to separate from the physical.
Yeah.
Because you know, anyone, and people see film differently. That's something also that we've all talked about, like, and we all see our three selves see film differently, generally similarly, but you know, people see the physical, and they, you know, he's got a hip wiggle and a click and close, and he just makes up ground, and okay, that's fine, but at the end of the day, it's going to take more than just the physical skill set.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's really about, and I've related this to quarterbacking recently, but we can put it to tight end play too, is that I think the longer I do this, and I try to take all the physical, technical, and conceptual skills I break them down to a very granular level. But the purpose of that is I'm trying to look at ways of how they take all these skills that they're learning and what's happening on the field and fuse that into solutions. And it's just how, you know, when people make jokes, you know, when Cecil says something witty or gives a good line with a setup to something that he heard, it's because he's taking what's around him and using what he's learned and his experiences to formulate what he's going to say, and do it with good timing, with the practice and the expertise that he's developed, you know, being a host, you know. And that's something that when you look at players, it's very similar in that respect, that at the end of the day, you can look at all these different things, but if they don't fuse all that information and all those skills together in a timely, confident manner, then it doesn't work. So when you look at a guy like James Mitchell out of Virginia Tech, or you look at, Jelani Woods out of Virginia Tech, James Mitchell out of Virginia. If you look at them as physical athletes and their basic skills of blocking and catching, they look like guys who could be starters in the NFL. Physically, they could be starters in the NFL without a doubt. And that's why they got a lot of play in college media. But college media generally is, college media has their tropes too, and they're busy covering 8 million different things. They're not studying draft prospects. They're asking other people who've studied draft prospects, or presumably has studied other draft prospects, what they think about these guys. And as a result of that, they might hear, oh, well, or they look at production, or they look at the height and weight, and they say, this guy is going to be good, or they see the athletic moments, but you're not looking at things maybe at that closer level. So when you look at them from maybe an intuitive level, a level of like fusing those skills together, James Mitchell's a good example of someone who he can go up to catch the ball. He's got the leaping ability. He can make catches with his hands and use the right technique. He's certainly someone that can body up a defender when needed to, when he runs, say, a stop route or something like that. So all the skills are there. But then when you ask him to work a vertical route and run a back shoulder play and jump up to make that catch, he can't jump up in time, put his hands where they need to be for where the ball arrives, and to be able to make an accurate catch of the football. And the farther away he is from the line of scrimmage, the harder it is for him to be able to win some of these targets that you would expect from a top tight end that shares a lot of the athletic abilities that he has. And that's an example of, that whole thing of being able to put everything together. And you got to be able to watch that way. Because if you're just watching based on all these separate things, then you might give too much weight to it and not look at how it all fits together. And that's one of the interesting things about studying players over the years. That's why, like, Desmond Ridder, a quarterback, some teams are, some people are giving him a lot of high play. And I told Russ Landy yesterday when he called that if I could give an offensive coordinator a visor that flashed red or green, and the coordinator could be like instantaneously click danger red and then or go ahead and throw it, then Desmond Ridder would have a chance. Right now, I don't think it's going to happen. And there are a lot of people, he may end up being the latest Baker Mayfield that gets drafted very early, who I wouldn't have in my top 10 quarterbacks.
Ridder is physically gifted, but so is Jake Locker.
So
you know what I mean?
Drew Lock.
Yeah,
he's not as quick. He's not as he's not as good of a runner, but he can throw it like Drew Lock did.
Yeah. All right, Bloom. And see, this is the thing, because years ago we'd probably piece through every single tight end and be like, you know what, you should really keep an eye on Peyton Hendershot from Indiana. Actually, I don't mind his game, but anyway, like a Big Ten tight end. But anyway, like now it's just okay. Identify who can play, and then be on the lookout for those other traits. That's why when I went to the Shrine Bowl. And what was your nickname for him, Matt? Chigo, right?
Yeah, Chigo. That's what I heard.
Chigo
Lance Erline call him was Chigo.
The Conquo. Okay, yeah, from Maryland. I mean, the dude stood out like a Delaney Walker. I wasn't necessarily pouring over his Maryland film at the time, but you know what I did afterwards? I went back and looked, because you're just looking for those traits coupled with that ability to put it all together. I think that's what's missing. Still to this day, as the draft industry, Bloom, has certainly exploded. I still think, other than the rookie scouting portfolio and the work of some of our other friends, there's still some missing pieces in terms of like let's put it all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you just got me with visions of what Matt Canada could do with Okonkwo, right? What hope is there for the Steelers? No, there's so many different things to piece together here. And I think that, again, I want to say to everybody out there, you can just Google Great Emotional Divide Matt Waldman and just incorporate that into your understanding. And I think another thing that Matt is conveying, that folks, if you're just dipping your toes in the water, you want to watch some college prospects and try to do that projection like you're looking at the ultrasound and trying to see, in your mind's eye, what the baby is going to turn out like, or the baby and what the adult's going to turn out like. It's all for X. X is what is going through the player's head. Matt brings up these terms like processing or a process. And that is one of the best things that you can discern from watching the college tape, more than the physical traits, more than the skills, is how they're taking visual information and incorporating it into their understanding what's happening around them and acting on it with valid decisions that affect the game. And I think that this is something that hopefully the good teams are doing. And I think that what we learn when you add in these elements, processing, emotional maturity, then you can start to see why more and more every year we should throw out draft capital as soon as we see how players are responding to the NFL ecosystem, the NFL environment. And I think that while there's a lot of people that are doing a lot to advance our understanding of things with their models and draft capital, obviously, this was a debate I got into on Twitter. This is why you don't go on Twitter, since you're smart. That if you have a model and you put draft capital in the model, that's a fudge. That's a hedge. You're basically saying, just in case my model's wrong, I'm going to incorporate draft capital, which incorporates all the other things in my model anyway, but just with the NFL's opinion of those things, right? But the NFL, the good teams, realized right away when they were wrong about a player on both sides. So I think that more and more as we do this fantasy football stuff, we should be open to, selective amnesia, where we just don't try to argue with what we're learning about these players. And the tight end position, of course, is one where you have Antonio Gates, you have Darren Waller, right? You have these players that were not highly regarded, that sometimes, especially for fantasy, set the standard at the position. So, see what Mo Alley Cox is going to do. And that's the other thing. You mentioned Okonkwo. These players sometimes converts from other positions or other sports. They're still in that embryonic part of their development. And it is a position that involves a lot of competitive toughness. I'm reminded of when Rob Gronkowski was on the Manning cast this year, and he said, like when you take that first hit, it like activates your body. Yes. That's the kind of player you have to be as a tight end. You might not have to be that kind of player as a wide receiver. You have to be that kind of player to be a successful tight end. Those kinds of things that we're watching, How does a player react to getting that first big stamp over the middle from Derwin James or whoever? That's how you're going to learn who's going to make it, as much as their measurables or their draft capital.
I love this conversation because it's simply fascinating. And it is, especially with tight end. Tight end, I give him 3 years. Like, I'm not ready to give up on a guy. And I was talking yesterday because I had invited, not that I needed to invite him, but he lives up in Fort Collins. So I invited our very own Dave Kluge from Footballguys. And he said, sometimes the people that he's ran into, and he's, somewhat new to the game, although he's been doing fantasy analysts for 3 or 4 years. He's like, he was discovering, and I had my old man moment, Matt, because I was like, I remember my first beer. But he was like, yeah, there's some people that are so much into the draft that they kind of don't ever change their opinion from when that guy came out. And I was like, oh yeah, that happens. People get set because we can't look at these prospects. We can look at what they've done. We can project what they're going to be, but we also have to realize when change is going to happen with these guys. What could promote and prompt that change within their game, especially at tight end, when it takes years. And people ask me about Noah Fant. I'm like, well, this is what he does. This is what he hasn't done. Let's see what he can do in a better system. You know what I mean? Like, he's still got some time, even though a lot of people, and of course, everyone loves to plant their flag. And Marco Polo, I told him, I said he was a bust when they drafted him. Well, you can't really call him a bust yet, because players do take time. I remember the Julius Thomas thing, Sig, where it was like Cecil said Julius Thomas is good. He didn't do anything for 2 years, and then when he did, he only did it for 2 years, but he got 24 touchdowns in 2 years.
Right.
So let's have a little patience. A little understanding, unless you've been waiting for the rookie scouting portfolio, then your patience is gone. You're like, give it to me now. And again, it's like cracking a can, baby. All right. Rookie scouting portfolio day is almost upon us. Matt Waldman, go forth and be awesome.
Well, I'm finishing up the last chapter. Just a little bit to do there, put the book together. Should be out tomorrow. I'll email everybody who has purchased and let them know when it's available for download. And so we're looking forward to being able to do that. Of course, it's available for $21.95. You get a pre-draft, which really is my unfiltered look without the using draft capital at all as a way of just saying, here's how I think they look on the field, regardless of what anybody's saying about them or what their media hype was, which usually is based on talking to people who are giving them hints about their draft capital. And then I do a post draft, and the post draft comes out a week after the NFL draft. And that's where I take a look at draft capital and say, okay, here, now that he's been drafted higher, here's where his fit the opportunity that he's getting, plus the fit that he has with his team, the depth chart that he's on, and the long-term or short-term contracts that are in those depth charts are going to factor into his opportunities for development. And then I re-rank players based on that. And I like doing it that way because then you can account for draft capital and say, look, draft capital is about opportunity. And as a result of that, they get the earliest opportunities to fail. And you have the stubborn teams that say, look, we've invested all this in this guy, and the owner likes this guy, the GM likes this guy, the coach hates this guy, but I got to play him anyway. And they give him a longer leash than necessary. Whereas somebody else, works their way up, as Bloom said, and teams recognize immediately, oh, well, we were going to give Matt Flynn a big contract, but there's this guy that stood up to Cecil Lammey that we saw, and we like the fire that this little guy has, and he's looking pretty good. Let's give Russell Wilson a shot here to compete for that job, and we're going to abandon the draft capital that we normally have for quarterbacks. So you get all that plus a newsletter. It's available for $21.95 at mattwaldman.com, and a percentage of that goes to Darkness to Light. Every year, I've raised over $50,000 thanks to my subscribers since I think for the past 10 years. And they're an organization devoted to preventing sexual abuse of children, as well as being able to help individuals, organizations understand how to handle it when a child or a family reports that event happening, so that they don't compound the trauma that occurs with that, and that they can investigate or handle the situation much more appropriately than what we've seen play out time and time again. d2l.org if you just want to donate to them, just because.
MattWaldman.com, rookie scouting portfolio. And Sigmund, I remember the days, here's our old man talk again, where I used to send all of us emails like, this is our topic list tonight, guys.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, I just want to hang out with you guys and talk and get into football conversations, but then get into the personality conversations. When Daniel in our chat room was like, talking about drive to succeed and personality, like these are much more fascinating because we've seen the click and close, and we've seen the snatch and grab, and we've seen all these sorts of traits, the physical traits. Yes. These guys don't make it here without a lot of those physical traits. What else is it? And it's almost in a way, Bloom, like pondering life, like we've experienced a lot. We have some wisdom, but what else is it? I was talking to a neighbor of mine. She's from Canada, lives on the corner by the mailbox, an elderly woman. And she's just going on and on for like 20 minutes. I went to go check my mail, just stand around talking to her. And she's like, I'm sorry, I'm chatty. I was like, you have wisdom. I want to hear, I want to listen. I want to learn. She was telling me about, growing up in Canada, and she was talking about, disasters that her communities had gone through in terms of like, flooding and fires and stuff like that. As we'd had, the Marshall Fire and a fire here just 3 houses down from me that destroyed 3 houses. So it's like, gain that wisdom, gain that knowledge from wherever. And like, I want to know what makes it tick. It's everything, but I just want to know what makes it tick.
Yeah, this is totally non-football stuff. Like someone said, this has turned into a couch episode. You got to love it. But to be fair, there's so many people doing great work breaking down the rookies. If you want a laundry list, if you want fades, or put your chip on this player, plant your flag, there's so much great content out there, and we would just be contributing to that din. And I think that, again, the RSP and Matt Waldman's process and things you can read on the RSP blog show the intersection of all these things. But I'll just leave with this, piggybacking on your story, Cecil. And again, New Orleans, honor the ancestors, right? Something I hear almost universally as we're all getting older, our parents are all getting older, is I should have asked more questions. I should have listened to more stories. I should have been more receptive to, like you said, Cease, that wealth of knowledge and perspective. And as our world becomes more and more unreal, as we are surrounded by more and more things that are projections of humanity, we have a religion now, but I think it's that we worship ourselves. I think that's what we worship, basically, is our abilities and what we create, going back to our original talk about standing on the shoulders of so many people.
Celebrities as Greek gods.
Exactly, right. Mount Olympus. Hey, we had quite a week with that. Is to go back to the real, and the real is people. It's always people. And I think that the people who came up where there was more real than unreal in the world, and what they have to say is something we all need more of. So everybody, go watch that person down the street sitting on their porch, go into their mailbox, take some time, because you're the one that will be richer. The time that what you'll get out of that time is something beyond what we get out of this time, this moment. In like, we have to be productive. We have to mine everything for value, right? We have to commodify and monetize everything in our lives. I mean, shoot, I own a property like Evan Silva's coming tomorrow to stay on the other side. We have to monetize the extra space on our property, right? But at the same time, the greatest
upcharge him.
Establish the run, baby. No, but my point is that the greatest riches, the greatest treasures are still in other people, and they're right there in front of us. And like you said, Cease, we don't always take out the time to do that, and people will apologize for that. And there's nothing to apologize for. It's actually we're the winners. We're the ones getting the thing of value there.
Can I piggyback one quick thing?
Yeah.
Just be grateful. Think about, at the end of your day, just think about what you're grateful for, whether it's something you learned, whether it's someone in your life, whether it's something that you accomplished that you've been setting forth to, or something that you're getting close to accomplishing. I mean, you'll sleep better at night too. You'll sleep better at night if you just think about what you're grateful for, as opposed to what you have to do. What is it that you're worrying about that next day? Focus on the things that you actually feel good about, whether they're accomplishments or whether they're just things or people or circumstances in your life. And I think that's, I think Bloom's alluding to that, and I think that it's something that can be extremely helpful to you in that sense.
That is a wrap for today's Audible Live, everyone. Make sure to do all those YouTube things: like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. We have all of our YouTube shows here: Dynasty Newsletter, Dynasty Show, Mailbag Show, the Launchpad with the aforementioned Dave Kluge, the Audible Live, On the Couch, and that's the off-season shows. So wait till we get back in season. There is never an off season. It's only a non-playing season. Never an off season for talking Broncos. Am I right, fellas? Yeah. Anyway, we love you all and appreciate you all very much. He's Matt Waldman. He's spectacular. You follow him on Twitter at Matt Waldman. There is Sigmund Bloom. He is amazing. All I do is give you guys Spider-Man names, by the way.
Yeah, that's all he does.
It's the web of
wins,
Cecil
baby.
Lammey. Yeah, there you go. Everyone, we appreciate you. Have a blessed day, great day, fantastic day. Stay tuned. And as always, I command that you stay frosty.